Good afternoon and welcome to HomeGames. It's Wednesday, it's 12:30 with me, your host, Mark Poulton. We are joined today by Kate Shaw, who is wondering what she's got herself in for. No, actually, it's Steve here, it's me. I need to put these on, otherwise I can't see what I'm doing. I'm in the office today, and it's amazing what you find kicking about the office. I can't remember what the backstory was with that, but this is bespoke Mark Poulton Lancat merchandising, which is available from www.lancatfinancial.co.uk/merchandise. So if you need, yeah, Mark, it was me the whole time. If you need an early Christmas present for someone that you hate, it's actually really disturbing. Look at that. Why would we do something like that? No, it's me, it's Steve. Thanks to the tons of you who are joining us today with Kate Walsh. Hi, Kate Walsh. How are you doing?
I'm grand, thank you. I'm really quite disturbed by that.
Yeah, we fucked up a bit this morning and we sent out an invite channeling someone else and called you Kate Walsh. So apologies if you got a very confusing email this morning. No, but I'm joined by Kate Shaw, who is one of the many wonderful individuals who we've known for a long time and who is on the Lancat research panel and all those kind of things as well. Kate is also a long-time HomeGames viewer, aren't you, Kate?
I am.
So this is the first in a series of ask the audience. So if you're particularly nice to us on the sidebar, you might find us. You might find yourself on screen in the next wee while. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Kate. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you. I'm slightly perturbed that I've never been nice to anybody on the sidebar, but I'm still here. It's good to be here.
Where are you joining us from, Kate?
I'm in sunny Cardiff.
In sunny Cardiff, it's kind of Dreich Leith, which is kind of difficult to say, but it's kind of pissing rain here
as well. To be honest, I was lying about the sunny bit. I've just got good light.
Yeah, and you. So Kate's been watching us for a fair while now and joining us live, and is one of the liveliest members of the sidebar of shame there. Can you tell us about what have been the best sessions that you've joined in on, Kate?
Well, obviously they've all been absolutely marvellous. My favourites, to be honest, I've got a great deal of admiration and respect for anybody who has the balls to show themselves publicly. So I think my highlights were you chatting about your mental health with Mark and Rohan as well. They were particular highlights for me because you guys did such a good job of, obviously being really honest about how you were feeling and, how life's been for you and things like that. But also the way that you interviewed them and kind of brought out the really important stuff. They were great, but it's been a real highlight, I think, of a lot of people's Wednesday lunchtimes for the last 6 months.
Oh, cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's a bit funny, and we always want to, or certainly whenever I've been hosting, I want to get almost as much to the bottom of the person that I'm interviewing as well as the role. So there's going to be a little bit of that because I want to find out about your experience of running a business, because you run a very successful business down in gloomy grey Cardiff today, but Cardiff's a lovely place most of the time. Do you want to, let's kick off by finding out a little bit more about yourself, Kate. So why financial services? Because the cliche that we hear time and time again up here is, especially in Edinburgh, because it's bloody everywhere, is that, oh God, I just fell into financial services. Like, whoa, there we go. I was walking down the street in 2003 and I woke up on the annuity help desk at Aegon. That's what happened. I fell into the customer services division. But what about yourself? What's the background? What's brought you here?
Was that the last time somebody woke up on the annuity helpline? No. Well, you've just stolen my line because, I fell into financial services 24 years ago. I was working in the Lake District and I was probably about 30 years too young to be living up there because it's an amazing place. But I was young and foolish and I didn't appreciate it at the time. And I saw an ad in The Guardian of all places. I wanted to go back to London. I saw an ad in The Guardian of all places. It was one of those where they hold a mirror up to you and, if you're not dead, you get a job. And had the additional bonus of pissing my mother off because she wanted me to be a librarian. So off I went back to London.
Why did she want you to be a librarian?
I have no idea.
That's quite a niche occupation.
It's a very nice job, and working with money is very vulgar. So yeah, I think that's the reason why. I haven't quite got to the bottom of that. There's more work to be done there, I think. So yeah, I kind of fell into it. I thought I'll do this for a wee bit. You know, I was young, I was single, I had no commitments. I was in my mid-20s, and off I went back to the big smoke. And here I am, 24 years later. Do you want incarnations since, but yeah, pretty much a bit bloody, but mainly unscathed.
Yeah, so well, that's good. It's good that you're unscathed and you're here. Tell us a wee bit about your firm then. So what do you do now? So you run a business down in Cardiff.
Yep, it's a teeny tiny, small but perfectly formed advice business. I set it up at the end of 2014 when I finally got fed up of ever having to deal with anybody else, and I was going to do it my way or the highway. And it's mainly planning and advice hand in hand. It's just me and my terrifying power planner who knows all the things, so I don't have to. And between us, we look after about 60 clients who are great, who've been with me for years and years and years. Take on a few new referrals each year, but not because of lifestyle choices. I'm not particularly looking to grow it anymore. So it works, I hope, for my clients, and it works very well for us as a family as well.
So what fills your day job then? Is it mainly client meetings, client conversations, or what's the 9 to 5 look like for you just now?
Yeah, mainly client meetings. Some, working on the company as always takes up more time than perhaps I'd like it to, but mainly client meetings, and more and more of them at the moment. It's been a really busy period for me actually the last few months. I spent some of it away as well, which means organising the time slightly differently from perhaps how I would have done, but everybody's taken to Zoom really well, and actually I'm really enjoying not having to travel and be out there. It's worked really well for me.
Yeah, and how about big surveys, Kate? Are big surveys taking up a big part of your life?
I love big surveys. As soon as one of those big boys drops into my inbox, I'm all over it. I've done mine ages ago, I told you.
Yeah, because of course, ladies and gents who have very kindly tuned in, if I was a remotely competent host, then what I should have done was get the Lancat admin out of the way up front, but I got carried away and I got all excited with this nonsense. Look at it. It doesn't get any less freaky. Maybe if you give me an answer that I don't like, I will invoke the Paulson. I think that's the best way to go. But if I was a remotely competent host, I would have pointed out that we are promoting like hell our big annual omnibus study called State of the Advisor Nation. Kate, I think you were completion number 2 this year, or number 3, which I mean, something to aim for next year, right? But we do this big omnibus study every year, where last year something like 404 members of the advice community. So it's not just advisors, paraplanners, compliance directors, investment admin, paraplanners, whatever. If you work in an advice firm, then we want to hear your views. So if at the end of this lovely chat that we have with Kate, you feel motivated to give us your thoughts, then button right there, down there, right in the middle, takes you to the landing page for State of the Advisor Nation. You get a couple of things in return. You get a playback of the results, you get the big report, and when we come to do a year in review of the platform sector in 2020, you'll get that as well, as a thank you for your time, because it's a little investment in time. It's, what is it, Kate, about half an hour or so?
At the most. I mean, it depends if you actually bother to do it properly or just tick boxes.
But
half an hour at the most, the undying gratitude of Steve, and it means Mr. Paulson doesn't harass you every 5 minutes as well.
Both good things to aim for. And Kate said she's too polite to say on the live on the chat, but beforehand she told me it was the best survey she'd ever done. So there we go. Listen, getting back to why we're here today, Kate, because we actually, as part of our the stuff that we do at the Lancat, I occasionally come calling with smaller research exercises And we've been doing one recently over the last month or so, and I've been interviewing like 9 or 10 firms off the back of it. And I spoke to you a few days ago, and we got completely off topic and started talking less about the thing that I was meant to be talking to you about, and more about, or we spent a good 5 or 10 minutes talking about behavioural coaching and kind of lifestyle financial planning. And it got me quite interested because it was the most down to earth and kind of real way that I've heard it described, and some of the stories that you told about how you do business. So how about we go right to the very start of the process and talk me through what happens if I join you as a client. If I come to you with a little bit of money and I want your help, what do you do with me?
Okay, so yeah, Gareth, I can see that. Firstly, I mean, you would have been referred to me by somebody else most likely, so you'd kind of know what to expect, because I don't take clients on a purely transactional basis in terms of, you know, I only want to talk to you about my pension, for example. So you would come and go through a full planning process first before we got to the nuts and bolts of the actual products. And that's kind of that's a pretty broad thing. I mean, clients kind of move through the process in a similar way, but it is completely different for everybody because they all have different stuff that they want to talk about. And it's an organic thing, you know, you don't get everything in the first, it's not like a fact-finding meeting where, you know, you kind of know what they've got. I get them to do that themselves through my cash flow anyway. So it's an organic process that builds, and it builds over the long term of the relationship as well, you know, as we get to know each other better, and I get to know my clients really well, and, you know, understand better and get braver with them as well to challenge them, and you know, find out whether what they're actually saying is what they think they ought to be saying, or whether it's what they truly believe, or, you know, what really the whole point of this thing is. And you get to the point of, you know, where you have a situation where I had the other week, and I know I said this to you last week, but you know, I had a client who I was about to do a review, and I sent the, you know, the usual review stuff out, including his attitude to risk questionnaire for him to fill out, and I got it back and I read it, and I thought he was in a really shitty mood when he filled that out. I could tell from one of his answers that he wasn't in a good place. But because I know him, we then, you know, had a long conversation around that in the meeting, and it turned out that, yeah, actually he had a throat full of abscesses, he was on penicillin, he was feeling pretty crap about the world. But the relationship and the way that you kind of dig into the person and get to know them means that you don't just take that at face value. You have that conversation, you know your client, and, you know, in the broadest sense of, you know, what we're meant to be doing as planners is know our clients. It allowed me to firstly know that he wasn't okay, and this was probably a little bit squint away from what I would normally expect from him, but equally then to have that conversation with him that was much more meaningful, to say, right, what was this all about? Because this doesn't seem right to me. Have you had a huge change in mindset, or were you just having a crap day? And he was having a crap day. So we kind of dealt with that in perhaps a non-traditional way, but a much more meaningful way for that client.
So that's really interesting. And that was exactly the story that kind of prompted me to come back calling, to explore this in a bit more depth. Now, I get the fact that you obviously know this chap and you build up that relationship over time, and I totally get how that can be advantageous in terms of, you know, because ultimately we can't get in, it's really difficult to get into someone else's head, and it's your job to try and tease that out with questioning and, you know, goal planning and all the kind of things that are going to bring a financial plan to life. But what if I'm one of your referrals, right? And I'm you know, the brother of one of your pre-existing clients. So you maybe know a little bit about me already, but at some point on that initial meeting and initial conversations, my fate has to be sealed in terms of a product recommendation, or to go on a platform, or an investment choice. So tell me about the interplay of existing technology like risk profilers and stuff like that. So how do you know for sure, or is sure enough, that what you're doing at outset, before you really know them well, and you can have that kind of instinctive really good judgment call that you've clearly been able to make, at what point does that comfort level set in? If you know what I mean, that's a pretty big question. It's maybe an unfair question, but how do you make your peace with the fact that you're not going to know them as well as you need to at outset, and you're probably going to have to make up that product recommendation before that relationship builds up?
You kind of do have to make your peace with that, and just do the absolute very best that you possibly can, because it isn't just about getting to know that person really well as well. You know, there are elements of, you know, the kind of the more traditional advice process that we go through that supports that, or is the other way around. It just taking attitude to risk as an example of that. You know, it's a contentious subject because, you know, a tick box on its own, it just isn't going to cut it. You could argue 5 years down the line, you could possibly have a meaningful conversation with a client that would give a better output than a tick box would. But the combination of those two things is always going to be, as soon as you're setting one foot over the line of advice, you know, it has to be the two together. And there is really no reason why the two can't complement each other. You know, the behavioural side of stuff and the relationship building and all of that, you know, it's a real hot potato at the moment, and so it should be. But it doesn't negate the need for making sure that we're doing the fundamental job where products and platforms and investments and everything else are involved. We're not losing sight of that as well. It's not one or the other. I think it can be, but if you're going to do what I do and incorporate the two, then they each have their important moments. You know, one will be more important at any given time during the process.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And it's funny you mentioned there is a real prevailing wind behind this stuff. Probably rightly, because the for want of a better phrase, the softer side of, you know, client relationships and stuff like that has probably been neglected by the sector historically. So if you think of, if you talk in really reductive, simplistic terms, we've gone from old world commission churning, product selling, what have you, and there's been no doubt really good planners who've been doing this for years and years, right? Who've been doing the behavioural side of things really well. But there is a really strong prevailing wind behind moving to, you know, behavioural coaching and financial planning, to the extent that you now see some provider-led seminars and conferences which would have traditionally been a thinly veiled product push, frankly. And to some degree, they still are, because, you know, someone's not going to put on a conference without wanting them to do business with you, because that would just be stupid otherwise. But in terms of being an overt, let's get in a room and talk about a widget, and it's going to do 6% if it does this, and it's going to do 4% if it does that. But we've moved towards, you know, more business planning conversations and, you know, lifestyle conversations. Has it been, in some instances, do you think, to the exclusion of things like, you know, good old-fashioned suitability discussions and due diligence and product research and platform research and some of the stuff that we at the Landcat get our hands dirty with? You know, as you know, we've put a tool together to help with. We have, and actually, I'm going to do, there's a quick mid-session interval. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the office, actually, because I meant to do that at the start and go and say hello to the architect, because it's rude to not speak to someone else who's in the office. And there is Mr. Terry Hudder with his massive bottle of wine in the background that he's taken home this afternoon. He is the one of the chief architects behind Analyzer. So quick hellos from Terry aside, has a lot of this chat been to the exclusion of important things like platform research and suitability and all those kind of things?
Can I just start by saying that we will always need and love the Landcat? Do I need to go on? Are we done? I think perhaps the pendulum has swung a wee bit far across that way just now, because it's something that has been around for a good long time, and a lot of us have been doing this for years and years and years and doing a really good job. But like every single profession, everybody needs a new shiny, and this is perhaps it at the moment. I don't think it should be to the exclusion. I think they need to go together, unless you are genuinely marketing yourself, setting yourself up as purely a financial coach. And, you know, there's plenty of room for that as well. But you're not advising then. These things need to go together. You know, everything that you've just said, you know, even around product research, if you know your clients really well, your prod segmentation is going to be really good, isn't it? So therefore your research is going to be much more meaningful, and you're going to have a great outcome for your clients. That's simplistic, but that's kind of how I see the two fitting together in just about everything, you know, referencing back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about the attitude to risk. Put the two together. You know, if you've got a really genuine interest in knowing the people that you're working with really well, and you do have to have that genuine interest, I think. You can learn the skills, you can learn how to ask great questions, you know, we can all do that. But if you're not really genuinely interested in that person, and, you know, I'm just nosy, this is great for me. I love getting to know people and why they do what they do, and, you know, what makes them do weird stuff and all of that. Yeah. I love all of that. So for me, this is just the, you know, the perfect way to spend my working days. But it goes so well with the traditional stuff as well. The two should go together, and I would like to see a move later on when things, you know, when the pendulum swung back more towards the middle again, where it all settles back into a whole rather than two separate parts.
That makes sense. We've got a couple of questions coming, Kate, so I'm just going to go to them first. Well, there's Lancat Mike. That's Mike Barrett saying, Steve out of breath from standing up. Hashtag athlete. I'm out of breath because I'm so tired because I'm working so hard, Mike. And if you ever fancy a wee tennis match, let's see how that works out. On the questions, important technical question for Kate: crunchy or flake? I think that's in reference to the World Cup of chocolate that's going on the old Twitter just now with I forget her name. Is it Tess from Mercy?
Yes, Tess. If anybody ever sees me eating a packet of that rubbly, flaky bag of disappointment, then you can have me carted off somewhere. Crunchy, obviously.
I voted for crunchy as well.
Even a question. Who asked that?
That was Fiona Tate.
Oh, there we are.
Brian Hill says someone should make a combo like a Schlake or a Flunky. You're hired at the Lancat with that kind of creative thinking, Brian. Thanks very much. And a sensible question. Thank you very much, Alison, for keeping us on topic. Has lockdown made it harder or easier to communicate with your clients, and in what ways? And that is a seamless link to the next section of our interview.
She's good, she is. I wonder who that might be. It's been remarkably easy. You know, I was born for lockdown. I am the world's greatest introvert. I love people for about 10 minutes and then I'm done. So not having to go out anywhere, not having to see anybody, not having, you know, has been brilliant for me. But actually it has made my time with my clients on Zoom, who've all taken to it, you know, like ducks to water, remarkably easy. And I don't know if I mentioned that I spent a month in the French Alps in the summer, but, you know, I did. And I was able to keep, you know, communication, running client meetings, Zoom meetings from there as well. It's made life for me really easy, and clients' feedback has been really good as well. Also, I've been able to offer more in terms of, you know, the service that they're getting, because I'm not having to travel and, you know, spend my time in other ways. So there's been benefits for them as well.
Right. So do you think, and, you know, careful with the phrasing of this question, but in terms of COVID and the pandemic, you know, in terms of gearing customers up for these remote conversations, has that been because we always talk about these tipping points within, you know, wider sector conversations about what's the tipping point that will digitize financial advice and all that kind of nonsense that irritating people like us talk about. But has in your experience, has COVID and all the pandemic awfulness, has that been the thing that's helped enable these remote conversations, or had you been having some of them beforehand?
I'd had a few, but really very few. So it really has enabled the conversations. And I was concerned at the beginning that it would be a problem, but that was all in my head. Clients have just been absolutely fine. There were a couple who at the start said, oh, let's just wait and see what happens. And then what happened was, the lockdown just went on, and now it's considered completely normal that we'll be booking our meetings on Zoom. That's not to say I have any problem once things have settled down a little bit in going back to see people who want to be seen face to face. I've got a couple of very local, luckily vulnerable clients, and I think I and their families would certainly prefer to be able to see them face to face, but that's something we've been able to manage so far. But generally, for the large majority of my clients, it's just normal now that we chat on Zoom. And quite often we're finding we're having more shorter chats and more contact in a way that's, I'm quite informal anyway. That might come as a bit of a shock, but so having these sort of short informal chats with them is really quite easy. It's kind of moved into a state that seems pretty nice for all of us, to be honest.
And tell me a bit about France then. So is this a case of, the classic case of the dentist with bad teeth? Are you finally practicing what you're preaching with enabling your own life goal?
Yeah, pretty much. So I met my current husband 16 years ago, and ever since we met, we've been talking about spending 3 months of the year in France. And literally ever since we met, I think first weekend we spent together, we were talking about it. And we've always gone skiing and always gone to the French Alps, and it got to the point where it was about 18 months ago when we were coming back from the Alps, and I was sort of weeping and wailing and gnashing my teeth all the way back up to the tunnel. And I just said to Nick, look, we've either got to do something about this or shut up. I spend all of my working days working with people towards, life goals and all of that stuff, and, lifestyle that they want and all of those things. And we're not doing it for ourselves. So I came home and pretty much booked a month in France for the month that we spent in August, and right up until the time just before we left, until they opened the border 2 weeks before we left the UK, we didn't know if we were going to be able to go or not. And we rented an apartment from a wonderful man who was really flexible, and it was great. We don't need an expensive lifestyle out there. We had a very modest apartment. We lived right. We do at home. We drove down there. And it was just the most amazing experience. Booked to go back for a month in March, 6 weeks next summer. We're building up to spending 3 months of the year out there now, and everything that we do is geared towards planning to make sure that is how it's going to be until we retire, at which point we'll hopefully spend 6 months of the year out there.
Grand. Wee question here from Paul Miles. Hi, Paul. Have you had any referrals during lockdown, and what was the experience in dealing with them on Zoom?
Yes, I have. One was a pure planning, and others have involved products as well. But because they came in during the lockdown, there was the expectation that we would be talking on Zoom. It was absolutely fine. So there were certain things that were different, of course, but I think because I've become really comfortable on Zoom, that sort of projects out to anybody who I'm talking to. I don't have that sort of fear of this is a new and difficult thing to do, and that makes me more relaxed, which in turn helps to make them more relaxed. But I really haven't noticed any significant difference in the way that we've done things. You
don't lose, the human side of that first meeting, because I've asked Mr. Sivajoti, who's been on in the past, because I can't remember the statistic he quotes, but about a quarter of his clients, maybe a third, that he's never met, because it's a highly digitized process. And I was just wondering, do you just miss that initial human to human thing, or are we just becoming a bit more normalized to?
I'll tell you a wee story. I'm going completely off topic here, but it is relevant. I did, I know I've mentioned this before to you, but I did 10 years at Childline, 10 years as a counsellor and 4 years in addition as a supervisor as well. And I started off in Swansea on the phones, and then the NSPCC, God bless them, shut the Swansea base down because of funding. And we moved to Cardiff, and it all went online for the Cardiff base. And initially there was an awful lot of panic about, because we obviously weren't talking face to face with these young people. We were talking to them on live chat, and that was it. And there was a lot of fear that we wouldn't be able to do good quality counselling or, really get to know that young person. And it was absolutely fine. You got to the point where, I could almost get a feel for how that young person was feeling through a screen. Again, I think you need to be interested in that person. You need to be able to be properly listening. There are some skills perhaps that you need to tune up to make it work really well, but it can work really well.
Cool. No, that's really good, and obviously well done for all your work on Childline, and you know, someone's got to do these things, and it's amazing. So thank you for that. Question from Chris Davies. Hey Chris, how you doing? Any clients suffering pandemic turbulent market anxiety, and if so, how do you handle it?
I only had one. I got it as soon as it happened. I basically drove back through France and the pandemic followed us. We were coming back from skiing in March, so we arrived back in the UK and they locked us down. So I kind of came home. The markets did their huge drop when I was in France for a week in March, and came home, got straight in touch with all my clients, and an awful lot of them have lived through 2000, 2008, you know, some of them even before that, and they were all quite chilled. We've always talked about the long term, you know, all the stuff we do talk to our clients about, but which they nod and smile about until it happens. But this particular one is quite a bit younger than some of my clients, and this was her first real experience of being invested and watching a big drop. And she had a real panic, and it took a lot, you know, actually took me to say, no, we're not changing. You remember all these conversations we've had, remember what we talked about, remember what this is for, remember why we're doing this. And that's where spending that time on that relationship up front can really help, because not only do you understand why they're doing it, you can also use their words against them later on when you really need to. But she's fine. She stayed invested. You know, some of her circumstances have changed and we're making different decisions now, but that hasn't meant that she's changed her. And it turned out that her biggest fear was that I was going to catch COVID and die and she'd be left high and dry. It took us a long time to get to that point and to find out what really was the problem. Yeah.
Grand. Two more questions. One from me, actually, because I'm the host and I'm allowed, and then I'll ask the other one. Selfishly, because I'm doing a future Landcat research project on ESG investing just now, and partly because I know Nick Lincoln, who you know is watching just now, and I know he's a big fan of ESG investing. I'll just wait for the reaction on the chat, and ideally, no, Paul. Hypothetically, right, if you have a more human-to-human relationship with your clients and understand their needs and their beliefs and their wants, is the logical extension of that a conversation about ESG investing and ethical investing and green investing and all those kind of things? Or are we still at a point in the sector where we don't fully understand this and we don't have the right stuff or the tools or the products or whatever? Hey, Nick.
Is this what we call a niche?
It's arguably it's a niche market, yeah.
It is a niche market. Hi, Nick. I'm kind of in two minds about all this. You know, yes, I recognise that it's a growing market. It's something that's really, really important to some people. I've got clients who have come in with this being top of the list of their, you know, or top of the agenda. And this is years ago. This isn't now. But it's suddenly now going to become a requirement. And as soon as something becomes a requirement, there is a risk it's going to push us in a direction that might not necessarily be particularly helpful. I have got nothing to back this statement up, by the way. This is just my gut instinct, but I'm the guest, so I'm allowed. If a client has a need, and as I say, the clients of mine who do have ESG portfolios have been very clear, but we really need to be helping these clients to understand what it is that they're after, because not all ESG funds are going to be created equal. There's a rush to market to create solutions to a problem that people don't even know they have yet. Very good, Darren. Yeah, it's going to require some clever work on the part of the advisors to not make this yet another tick box exercise and run the risk of a client ending up in something that perhaps isn't right for them just because they say they want a green fund. What does that actually mean? Yeah,
and we're going to be doing consumer and advisor research and trying to find out what's going on out there. So it's going to be really interesting. But yeah, but the kind of working hypothesis is that we don't have the infrastructure or the right conversations yet, and there's too much conflation of terminology out there, and the demand is unclear as well. So yeah, that's one for the future.
Will there be a questionnaire, Steve?
There might be a questionnaire, Kate, but it will be as good as they always are. And I'll leave it at there. So a question from Gareth the Black, a very interesting name to come on with. It's medieval times. Aside from pension administrators not being so inept, what change would you like to see in financial services?
Ooh. Yeah, that's pretty much the big one. Can we sort out the ineptness of pension? Yeah. That's a huge question to just chuck in. There's so much that needs to change.
How about a slightly different question then? What's in terms of your interactions and interplay with your clients? What is the bit of technology or change out there that would help with those conversations? Do you need better CRM technology? Do you need better risk profiling questions? Do you need them ripped up completely and started again? Oh,
this bloody risk profiling thing. It's just yeah. I mean, I don't think there is no perfect risk profiling questionnaire. It doesn't exist. You can go a long way down the line of saying it's all a load of bollocks, and to an extent it is. But we're back to what we were talking about earlier. You need an approach that involves a bit of humanity as well as a bloody form. Technology talking to each other would be the thing that would make my life the easiest, because I've got some bits of tech that that talk to each other. The days that the link up between Intelligent Office and Cash Cow work for me, it just brings joy into my life every single time it works. It's absolutely fantastic. And then there are other things that just don't, and it drives me absolutely bonkers, because I'm reasonably okay with tech, and it would just joining the dots up of everything would make our lives so much easier.
Yeah, and we hear that time and time again.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's ever going to happen, but that would be great. And if providers would stop dicking around and actually send the stuff through to IO, that would be great as well, please, if there's any providers listening.
Well, there are many providers listening, so Kate says
stop dicking around.
Stop dicking around. Now, we've got about 5 minutes left, Kate, and there was something I was going to ask you. As you know, we like to scratch beneath the surface of the person and find out about wider issues than just what you do in your day job. And we had one of my favourite conversations on HomeGames has been the one with Rohan Sivajyoti, who's one of the directors of Next Gen, but chiefly talking about his experience of growing up as a Sri Lankan individual in Darlington, and his experience of his and his dad's racism, and finding out about that. And I wanted to ask you about your experience of being a woman in financial services and running a business and being on the conference circuit and all those kind of things. And is the sector a better place in 2020 than it was when you got into it? And how far do we still have to go to make things a bit more tolerable in terms of some of the shit that you people have to put up with, unfortunately? You people. That was a turn of phrase, wasn't it, at the end there? It
was, wasn't it? Yeah.
I ran out of steam at the end of my sentence, and I closed it with a ridiculous thing to say, but how can we make the sector better?
It's significant, immeasurably better than it was 24 years ago. God, and before everybody starts squawking at me in the chat bar and saying it's not all men, most of you are pretty reasonable these days, to be honest. I even quite like some of you. But back in the day when I started, I was the only female advisor on a floor of 90 men in a horrendous culture where the few women who were there weren't allowed to wear trousers. It was skirts only, until the day I just turned up in trousers and yeah, what are you going to do? Sack me? But I got promoted in in fairly normal, reasonable period of time after I first started, and some man in the kitchen asked me who I'd slept with, so that was nice. So things have moved on a bit since then, but I can honestly say that even now it's quite rare for me to go to a CPD event, not stuff that I sort of choose to go to, where I tend to, if you're paying for it or whatever, there does tend to be a different kind of group of people there, but perhaps stuff that I need to go to. generally somebody will kick off a conversation with, are you admin or are you a paraplanner? Neither of which as a career should be something that is used as a put down, but it is. My responses to those over the years have changed, but it's got an awful lot better, but this crap is still going on. And it doesn't particularly bother me anymore because, I run my own company. I don't really have to interact with people I don't want to interact with, and I choose to hang out with decent people. But yeah, it's there.
So if it's there, and I have absolutely no reason or evidence to believe that it's not, I wholeheartedly believe you. But what can people like me, who I like to think I live my life as a reasonable individual, and I'm not try not to behave in ways that you would categorize as being sexist or offensive or whatever. But is there more for people like me to do, genuinely?
Yeah.
What would be your message for people like me? Is to call it out, or to not shut up about it? Or
you guys are the ones that are going to make the change. It's not the women. We've been fighting our corner for so many years. It's you guys who are going to make the change, not only in this profession, but right across the board. I've tried to bring my son up, who is now 20, to believe that I've brought him up no differently from, I believe, how I'd have brought up a daughter, in the hope that men in years to come are not going to have the conversations that they have now, which is, got to protect my daughters. It's like, well, no, we just can't be having these. But what you good guys can just keep on doing is keep calling it out, and I remember Rohan saying something very similar. I understand what it's like to be female. I have no idea what it's like to be mixed race. But I can try and understand. And I can call out any crap and racism or anything inappropriate, because it's there, and it's there all the time, and it's seemingly innocuous. The daily, everyday sexism, everyday racism, the casual stuff. It's so damaging, and all the good people can do is just keep calling it out.
Do you think there's a danger, and we're veering way off topic here, but I sometimes wonder if there's a danger that, if we live our lives online, in an increasingly, increasing manner, more and more time online and on social media and all that kind of stuff, you can kind of almost, and I've certainly had this feeling, you can con yourself into thinking that you're, trying to change the world, or you're an activist or whatever, because you're arguing with people online.
Yeah.
And then, you switch your laptop off or switch your phone off, and then, do nothing in your day-to-day lives where that might actually matter more.
Yeah.
Because how many times have you been on Twitter and someone's gone, oh, that's a really good point. I've changed my opinion because of what you said in those 250 characters.
Uh-huh.
Whereas actually there's maybe more we can do in day-to-day life. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing, really.
Yeah, but that's the important thing, isn't it? You are actually hypothesizing. You are thinking about it. You are taking on board what's going on. We say these things and you believe them. That is such a powerful thing. The number of times I've sort of said, just about the casual, or you a paraplanner, or you admin, and the response I've had from male colleagues has been, oh, I've never heard that. Well, that doesn't mean it's not happening all the time. The fact is that you've gone, yeah, I hear that, that's happening. What can we do about it? And it's that's going to drive the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because
it's like turning a big ship. It's going to take a long time, but we can't stop just pushing it every single day for everybody, for any kind of inequality at all.
Grand, yeah, because it's funny, the story you were telling me earlier, it reminded me of a couple of instances where, not at the Landcat, but in a previous role, where it's definitely gone on, and you've just brushed it off, or one has brushed it off and not challenged it because it doesn't affect me, and the person involved, it didn't appear to affect her either, but actually it maybe did cumulatively, so there's definitely having these conversations and finding out about actual experience has got to be the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely, it has. And the thing is, I'm a pretty resilient person, and I don't know what came first, the need to be resilient or the resilience. I suspect I've always been pretty resilient, but it does grind you down. And I'm quite sure that some of this has had an impact on the decisions that I made about where I'm going to work and what I'm going to do. And that's why I now work in my spare bedroom on my own, because I don't like people. But it does mean that I don't have to deal with this bullshit day in, day out. So it makes my life really, really nice. You know, the old saying for women of this profession, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of women in the sidebar nodding wisely here and going, yep, you know, never be as drunk at a conference as everybody would like to think you are. And if Darren Cook is watching this, don't you say anything. But you know, it shouldn't be, it just shouldn't be like that, but it still is.
Yeah, well, listen, Kate, that's been absolutely amazing. We're bang on our 45 minutes and a few seconds over. So the last thing to say is to thank you to the most important person here, which is Kate, for giving up your free time to indulge us in this ongoing nonsense that we do every Wednesday afternoon to hopefully bring like 0.004% light into what has been a bloody miserable year so far for a lot of people. Thank you to everybody who joined in today. There's been loads of you and loads of you contributing on the chat and the questions, which is great. Do that survey. Kate says it's good. It's right there. It's only going to take you another 25 minutes, half an hour of your day. Join us on YouTube if you want to see any of the Landcat archives, like and subscribe and all that kind of nonsense. Yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much, Nick. Thanks for not wearing that mask ever again. Just one last look for people who joined us late. If you, I might auction these off or do it like a, you know, like a Willy Wonka. 5 people get it.
Mention that mask and Willy in the same sentence, to be honest.
We've heard enough about Mark's Willy on HomeGames, so thank you never to mention it again. Listen, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll catch you next week when we have Rosanna Williams-Wood on, and she's going to be absolutely fantastic as well. So Landcat out. See you later.
Bye.